on in.
Okay, can I say something?
What do you want to say?
Yeah, let me say it. You will not see me in the rest of this part.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Our flight attendants. On the way out to Charlotte, we're going to cover 85 miles. We're going to do it in about 20 to 25 minutes from takeoff to touchdown. Current weather in Charlotte.
Because I think the airplane people would probably take my coat or Mentos.
Hey, Sam. Good morning, Sam. Ready for the museum?
I guess. Yes, I am.
That's good.
It's probably not worth it.
No.
It'd take like 3 hours to get.
My daddy taught me that. You see, whenever we built the P-51s, I think they put Allison engines in those things. And then through the Land Lease Act, and we sent some to Great Britain.
An old bike.
I think I seen an article one time about one of the most
And if this is Air Force One, this is Air Force Two, by a different inventor, Glenn Curtiss. What did the Wright brothers think of Glenn Curtiss? How about they hated his guts? From Hammond Sport, well, he's trying to, you know, pick up on, infringe on their invention. Anyway, look, in just 2 years, the second airplane we purchased has wheels. Isn't that nice? Yeah. Improvements. And one more thing, the Army started getting smart. There is no Air Force till 1947. They started to say, make it transportable, make it so you could take it apart, put it on a railroad car, so you could haul it somewhere. All right, we're moving. The United States had no American-designed airplanes in the war whatsoever.
Wow.
Here's the story of the airplane in the war. The United States Army didn't think the airplane was important. We'll buy a couple and all the Army pilots can take turns flying it. But the Europeans and the Wright brothers marketed it. Orville marketed it in Fort Myer, Virginia, and Wilbur went over to Europe to sell them to the countries over there, and the Europeans said, wow, the Red Baron was the top ace of the war with 80 victories. Well, how did it work out for him? Well, he didn't survive the war. He was killed in combat died in British soil. When he died in Britain, he was given a burial by the British with full military honors. Wow. Would you say war was different 100+ years ago?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, the airplane on the ground should look to you like a doghouse with a beagle sleeping on top.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know Snoopy?
Me.
You do? You don't know Snoopy? Really? Google Snoopy. Now, the Sopwith Camel, shocking facts, more British pilots were killed in training accidents than in combat.
Wow.
So today we would say not user-friendly. The airplane's taken out of the Army. He wants to form an Air Force in the 20s. Does it happen? No.
Yes.
Today we call it turf wars in the Pentagon.
Oh.
And then he says something very radical to the admirals of the Navy. He says, airplanes can do a better job defending the coastline than your ships, so you might as well take your ships and put them in port, and we'll defend the aircraft, the coastline with our aircraft. And oh, by the way, Admiral, he was polite. Sir, did you know an airplane can sink a ship? Well, I passed a picture over there, but the lady in the cart right there is right near the Ostfriesland picture. The German battleship, which was towed off the New Jersey coast in 1921, and Martin MB-2 bombers dropped bombs on it and sent it to the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, wow.
Billy Mitchell said, "We can sink anything you got, Navy." Does that come across cocky?
Yeah.
I gotta be careful, my son-in-law's in the Navy. I tread a fine line. Well, the problem with Billy Mitchell is he was kind of arrogant, kind of cocky. If you don't believe he's cocky, just look at that picture. That picture tells me cocky. And he ended up getting court-martialed for insubordination. So
Wow.
he overcocked. And they withdraw their loans. And the German economy collapses, which is the exact environment for the rise of Adolf Hitler. This man comes forward to say, I will make Germany great again. And I always say, darned if he didn't. 1933, he came to power. He was very good at political maneuvering. I don't want to get into the details, but in 1933, he becomes chancellor. And in 1939, he builds a German war machine, which begins World War II with the invasion of Poland. Here's the real shock. The United States military, at the beginnings of World War II, our military strength in the world ranked 17th. It's a 1 and a 7. Now, I always scratch my head when I say 17th place, and I ask myself, do you get a trophy for 17th place? And I got corrected about a year ago. A young lady said, no sir, you get a ribbon. You see how the humor rubs off? Now, my point, of course, there is always a point, is are we ready to fight World War II? Not just no, but heck no. See, anyway, so the aircraft that are behind me, the P-36 Hawk over here, the P-35 over here, they are both obsolete. They are no match to go in Pearl Harbor, and then after 6 months of fighting the United States with Japan, 17th place, we will end up suing for peace and get out of their business. Did they get it wrong? They woke up a sleepy
Giant.
giant. Somebody seen the movie before? How many of you have built a balsa model airplane? How about a kite? Here's one kite. Was it done out of steel and metal? Wouldn't work if you tried it out of steel and metal. Sticks and paper. Light. What did you have to have help carrying it? No. Lighter is better. That's the buzzword anytime you want to build an airplane. How light can you make it? It's the famous airplane, the P-40 Warhawk, flown by the Flying Sharks. C-40 Warhawk is on the edge of being obsolete. And it's flown by this group, the Flying Tigers. I'll get to the tiger in a minute. Who wanted to make the airplane look tough, so they put a shark's mouth on it. Very famous shark's mouth. And they flew against the Japanese as mercenaries. Civilian pilots, American pilots flying for the government of China. Tiger emblem is on the side of their fuselage, and here it is on their leather jacket. This is a Flying Tiger emblem of the squadrons. Now, it's provided for this unit by a company you may have heard of. Just raise your hands if you've heard of them before. Walt Disney Studios. Anybody? Okay. How many have heard of the Doolittle Raid before besides me? All right. How many have ever heard it called Army Meets Navy? How many think I'm talking about a baseball game? I got to adjust this. You thought I was going to say football, but I can't. It's been a while. All right. I call it Army Meets Navy because it's a radical plan in 1942. Radical from the standpoint that we've had the attack at Pearl Harbor, we've declared war, we ranked 17th in the world, right? So, it was a desire by the White House to find a way to strike back at the heart of Japan, show them we mean business. And the idea of the Doolittle Raid was a naval officers. And it's, again, geography. Remember I showed you that map? To find out if it's feasible. And he took the airplane down to England, Florida to verify with the right techniques we can get this airplane airborne in that distance with the right winds and so forth. Then he decided not only to that, but I'd also like to lead the raid. But there's a statement we make in the military, which is still true today. If you can't stand the answer, don't ask the question. So he's smart enough to know that not to ask for permission to lead the raid, because if he asks, he'll be told no. So he basically played one general off against the other. He told one general he was going to lead the raid, and that wasn't his boss, or he did the other way around. He's right now telling the colonel, he was polite. He said, "Colonel, you can launch your planes now, and we're going to or else we're going to cancel and go back to Hawaii. What'd you like to do, Colonel?" No way. How many are familiar with the rock and a hard place concept?
Yeah.
All right, so here's your options. Launch early, an extra 180 miles out, 12 hours out of sync, and launch your bombers knowing that you will not make it to a friendly runway. He takes off of airplane 001 off the deck first, and it takes an hour to get 16 B-25s off the deck. So the good news is they all made it to their targets assigned in Japan. They dropped their bombs as planned. Then, of course, the bad news is that they head for China in the middle of the night, bad weather like today, rainy, cloudy, low visibility. You have the question of, well, do I want to ditch? Do I want to crash land, or do I want to bail out? In the case of Jimmy Doolittle's crew, Aircraft 1, they bailed out. And the other good news is about 65 returned to fly and fight and die in combat in World War II as well because of the Chinese. The Chinese villages where these Doolittle Raiders crash landed and bailed out helped them escape from the Japanese looking for them. When a Japanese soldier found out this village helped the Doolittle Raiders escape, they executed everyone in the village. Something in the order of 200,000 Chinese executed for their help. Women and they probably didn't even bother with bullets, just bayonets. So Colonel Doolittle thought the mission was asking, what was it like to be full colonel? He said, I don't know, I skipped it. I poke fun, but in today's military, you don't skip a rank. You don't skip a rank anyway. He skipped a rank, he became brigadier general, and he later rises to 3-star general, and he becomes the 8th Air Force commander throughout the war, and he's also given the Medal of Honor for the Doolittle Raid that you see depicted here on the ship. All right, about the Tuskegee Airmen. One of the famous groups were the pilots that flew the Red Tail Angels P-51s. But we are a segregated country, we are a segregated military, and the question was, can the African American fly in the Army Air Corps aircraft in the war?
Yeah.
And they proved it exactly down in Tuskegee, Alabama. One of their best supporters of this program, the president's own wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. She actually went down to the school and took a flight to show her support of the training. So when we talk about the defeat of Germany in World War II, what I like to say is we have a Western view of that war. We look at it from our own shores. What was the war like fighting Germany? And here in this country, we say, wow, it was important. D-Day, June 6, 1944, the day we're taking the continent back from those darn Germans. Am I right? No? That wasn't the turning point. The turning point in the war was a year prior at a 6-month siege of the Russian city Stalingrad, because the German war machine made the mistake of invading the Soviet Union, and now a 6-month siege is the first time the German war machine is stopped. 2 million casualties at Stalingrad. And the German war machine is now being pushed back to Germany by the Russian army and begging for the Western Allies to start our Western invasion. And we said, I'm sorry, Russia, we're not ready yet. So here's the numbers that are not, you're gonna need socks. Soviets lost 27 million of their people fighting Germany in World War II. US losses, to compare, 1.5%, or 405,000. Are you familiar with the concept drop in the bucket? Now how many think Putin hacked my emails? Accurate numbers, you can Google it tonight, but I'll give you our biggest contribution, which you probably never heard. Logistics.
Whoa.
The United States, which is an industrial nation, and we're a long way from our enemies, we can outbuild our enemies. We don't build washing machines anymore, we don't build cars anymore, you know, et cetera, et cetera. What are we doing? We're producing the war materials to win the war, because we're very proud of it. It's been on display for about 5 years now. I scratched my head, I can remember. Why is it so important? Because it was one of the first to complete the required 25 missions that bomber crews had to complete to be able to return home to their families. 1943, you have a 25% chance you're going to make it to 25 missions. It did, and it went on a war bonds tour, and after the war, it was saved by the city of Memphis from the scrap heap. It would have been cut up for, you know, beer cans. And then over decades of deterioration in Memphis, Tennessee, they finally decided the right place for the Memphis Belle in 2005 was Dayton, Ohio. We all right, you're going to think I'm stuck on percents here, but I tell people about 75% of the bombs dropped in World War II missed. Okay, you remember when I was talking about the Japanese Zero and lighter is better?
Yes.
I give you the P-47 flying tank. Flying SUV? How about flying brick?
Yeah.
Do bricks fly? The answer is not very far. P-47, I'm going to use the adjectives that describe it. Big, heavy, rugged, gas guzzling. The last one's not so good. So what is it? It is a rocket for tactical support missions to drop bombs on enemy troops on the ground, and it's got armor plating around the pilot. This airplane will take a licking and keep on ticking. Nobody has a 10-inch watch anymore? Did I just date myself? So, that's the drawback. It's great for attacking the enemy. Nobody would argue with me saying the best American fighter of the war is the American P-51 Mustang. Actually, built my work here. How about that? Would you use the word new and improved? Oh, yeah. It cut our bomber losses in half. because of the design of the airplane. It's got what you call it, laminar flow wings. And what the heck is that? Well, typically a wing tends to be pretty chunky right in the first third. It tends to be pretty thick initially to create the lift. But then that also causes, that's called, you know what they called it? They called this the doodle bug. And you say, wait a minute, something that's flying over to strike your city and kill you, they called the doodle bug. Isn't that a nice name? Yeah. Nice and, yeah. Anyway, several thousand of these were fired. About, I don't know the number, in the thousands, 4,000 or 5,000 British died with these raids on London and a couple other cities. And then the one that was really the terror, we talk about silent death. The V-2 rocket, the ballistic missile, which is going to come from 60 miles up in the atmosphere, diving on London at supersonic speed. You won't even hear it coming when it hits. And all of a sudden you're walking down the street and the block next to you, boom, and all of a sudden that block is gone. And of course, who was the designer of that V-2 rocket? A man that we later will embrace in the NASA, Wernher von Braun. Cameras. Reconnaissance. It's a very simple concept that if you're a general back in England and you send a bombing raid to Dresden, let's say, or Hamburg, what do you want to know after the bombing raid's over? Did we hit it? Did we miss? Do we have to go back? So I would guess 3 or 4 hours after the bombing raid, when the smoke clears, you're going to send one of these reconnaissance airplanes at high altitude for your side. Anyway, now, German technology. Over here, let me see if I can get the clear on it. Right there, the Me-163 Comet rocket plane that literally launches, accelerates almost vertically up to 30,000 feet. It's got a cannon. Am I going to give you a test at the end of this tour? No. I don't have time. But, are you ready? If you don't remember any airplane on my tours, on the tours today, at all, if you say, I'm just going to remember one, right? This is the one you should remember. Why? It's the one that ended World War II. And I don't mean one like it, I mean this one. The actual aircraft. The B-29 boxcar. Now, I'm going to move it along real quick and tell you that the B-29 was our third of our heavy bombers, 4-engine bombers of the war, and it is only used against Japan. And the most devastating raid in the history of aviation was March of 1945 when we attacked with 330 B-29 bombers. We attacked Tokyo and we adopted the same techniques the British were using, incendiary bombing raids. In that raid that night on Tokyo, we burned to the ground 16 square miles of Tokyo and over 80,000 Japanese died in the firestorm. Why did we do that? We had to deal with the jet stream, number one, and if you have a 150, 200 mile an hour wind at 28, 30,000 feet, you're going to drop your bombs at that altitude and you're not going to hit anything. So it was a General Curtis LeMay whose philosophy was the fast. I'm kidding, I'm not kidding. We were scheduling the invasion of the first southern Japanese island for November of 45. The Marines are going to go ashore. The Japanese are teaching their women and children how to fight with bamboo sticks. We dropped the bombs on Hiroshima first, August 6, 1945, with no surrender. 3 days later, this airplane dropped the second and last atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki. Was a third bomb immediately available? No. What happened when the war went on for another week? The Russians declared war on Japan. They were at war with Japan for less than a week. And then the Japanese military attempted a coup to overthrow their government and stop the surrender. That military coup failed, and World War II in August 15th of 1945 came to a screeching halt. Think about it. Without invading Japan, we convinced a country that did not believe in surrender to surrender and bring the war to a close. Nobody else has to die. Yes, sir.
Do you know where this aircraft landed after it dropped that bomb?
Tinian. No. It was base.
Okinawa.
Okinawa.
There's a B-52, so really beautiful. Fighter jets, supersonic jets.
Can you hear me?
It's a 12 Boeing.
1, 2, 3. Louder.
Be good. We're all here, and so we're all really excited.
Members that are not on board, they could be at a site in the States or any place deployed, or a C-130 flying around. The aircraft you see over here is the Rq4 Global Hawk. 20 years ago, the Global Hawk took off from Edwards Air Force Base north of Los Angeles and flew non-stop to the Royal Australian Air Force Base, Edinburgh, in 23 hours. During the late 1990s, they tested it for stealth tendencies and characteristics. A lot of the research and findings from that program was incorporated into the F-22 as you see there. We're going to start with the Korean War. 30 seconds. We sent over some Army divisions that were occupying Japan at the time, and unfortunately they were more of an occupation force rather than a combat-ready division. Especially with the sophistication of the jet engines, the operational rate of the aircraft were below Air Force standards most of the time. And they needed a ground attack aircraft that have the distance in the armament.
I told Sam when I was his age, I flew this airplane.
Oh, really?
I put on my football helmet, got on my bike, and I was transformed into being an F-86 pilot. Went down the street.
Wow.
And
So neat
the
looking
37
plane.
and the 23 on carriages on the ground were standard anti-aircraft defenses with a autonomous ground.
On the plane?
Yep, yeah.
Plane right behind
Only about 500 This B-26 Invader during World War II that was deployed in
Now, would this airplane
World War II into the T-6 Mosquitoes. They would have a pilot, another pilot, or an Army ground officer who's familiar with terrain, and they were identifying targets either for the artillery or ground attack aircraft. And at the time of the Korean War, we were less than 400,000 people worldwide that would fly outside in the international waters, breaking up spurious communications and electronics. And that used, as I said, the flying boom technique. Now the F-54s back in the States in '52, they managed to fly rather than being sent over by ship. And they, from California to Hawaii, they were refueled twice using the boat he was in. So a lot of his recommendations were here. And you had whole weather suits, and so immersion suits.
I'm pretty sure the pilot goes up there.
Maybe. Big plane, huh?
And I think people's tracking.
Yep.